Meditations with Ryan Slomak.
Hello, everyone. It's delightful to spend some time with you. My name is Ryan Zlomek, and this is the Meditations Podcast, a show dedicated to making space for conversations with interesting people just to see what we can learn from one another. On today's show, we have episode 51, and if you're somebody who's been listening for a while and is like, yo, dude, where have you been? My apologies. I put the podcast on hold for the summer just to sort of focus on life, and now I'm so excited to have some new conversations for you. So today we have Michael Hilby, and if that name doesn't mean anything to you, but you're someone who's gone to the New York State Fair, or you've gone to a variety of different festivals, you've done cruise ships, you have lived in Key West, Florida, and seen street entertainers, you might know Hilby, the Skinny German Juggle Boy. Hilby is just this amazing comedic entertainer who's known for his juggling, known for his unicycle routines, known for using the Chinese yo-yo, and known for just entertaining and offending in a playful way people of all ages. So we're going to learn his origin story. We're going to hear about his extensive travel, the way in which he learned how to juggle, and most importantly, the way in which he thinks about himself as an entertainer. So if you're somebody who's interested in just finding ways to throw comedy places and to take your skills and just showcase them to the world, this episode is for you. So without further ado, let's hear his story. Here is Michael Hilby. Michael, it's so nice to have you on the show. I've forever known you as Hilby for literally decades. At this moment, you're actually beaming into me from Connecticut where you're taking some downtime for yourself. That's unheard of. I only ever see you on the road.
Well, that's true, but we do have social lives, and it's very important to, especially after a busy summer. I do about 300 shows a year, and from the 300 shows a year, I do 200 between June and beginning of September. So by the beginning of September, my body usually tells me to take some time off. And taking time off doesn't necessarily mean I'm in a hammock, but I have projects that give me peace and solace and recuperate my strengths.
Well, I love it. Well, I'm so excited to talk about your touring life and just the pure insanity that's that. But let's take a step back. Having done some research with you, I was trying to figure out whether the German part of, the Skinny German Juggle Boy was true, and apparently it is. You grew up in Berlin, but you were born in Wiesbaden?
Wiesbaden. Many people in this country know Wiesbaden because there's a military hospital, and usually during foreign conflicts, Wiesbaden is in the news because many wounded soldiers get there. But it's a smaller town next to Frankfurt. So it's a spa town. It's very pretty. It's lovely. And in the heart, in the middle of Germany.
That's awesome. And I don't know if you said this as a joke or not, but your dad was a firefighter?
No, no, please. You know, believe nothing what I say and only half of what you see.
So tell me about your upbringing. What was the life of the Michael in Germany?
Well, I could really go into detail. I have quite an interesting story as a child. Um, we both might need therapy after that. So to make a short story long, I ended up in Berlin. I finished high school there, and I started college education for being a social worker. And I wasn't really all that great at it, and so I had to take a semester off. When I say I had to take a semester off, I was on the waiting list for the next classes for a semester, and so I took off, and I just never came back. And at this point, I was 21, and I did not know how to juggle. I had never been exposed to circus or any kind of performing arts world by my parents, really, to be honest, besides classical music, perhaps. Um, and yeah, so I'm first generation circus.
First generation juggler. Well, let's stay in Germany for a little bit. I mean, what did your parents do professionally?
My father was an industrial chemist, and that sounds fancier than it was. I mean, he basically mixed colors in giant pots for car companies. And my mom, well, that's a really long story. She knew how to take advantage of the system. Let's put it this way.
As a professional juggler, I think you've done that pretty well.
Yeah.
You ended up deciding to go to college for social work. Whether or not that worked out is a different story, but like what made you decide that that career field was the one that you wanted to explore?
I think it was more like the general vibe of the people who did it, and doing something good, and also being in Berlin, not having go to the military. That was part of it as well, I would say. Um, but it was not so much that I necessarily wanted to be a social worker. It just seemed like a fun thing to study, and spend your time with. And then once I started it, the community was absolutely fantastic, and it was a lovely school, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it was sort of also my last possibility to get an education, because I wasn't all that great of a student and all not necessarily that nice of a student. um, so I changed schools many times, but I was what some people would describe a problem child, perhaps, in the school district. And or other people would say, "Oh, I wasn't the right fit," or whatever it is. I wasn't excelling in school, that's for sure. And finally, in that chapter, I did, and it was fantastic, and I loved it. But yeah, I wasn't good enough to continue right away, so I left.
How far did you make it into the program?
2 years, yeah. No, I would have made it. I think eventually I would have, but maybe it was also just ultimately you do know if this is really your calling. At the end of the day, you know if it's really true, and I guess it wasn't enough. But also, I had to leave Berlin for other reasons. I had some legal trouble, and I was being told that it was what people would call a last warning. Um, and I thought that was a good time to buy the tickets, to go to Asia.
Yeah, and did you go to India at first? Was that kind
Yeah,
of?
we wanted to go. We wanted to go all the way to Thailand, and we wanted to do it overland. That was the idea. So what we ended up doing was we hitchhiked to Budapest, and then got tickets for the Trans-Siberian train. We went to Moscow and stayed there a few days. And from Moscow, took the Trans-Siberian train to Beijing, and then we realized how long it is from there to Thailand, how difficult. And then we heard that you could go to Pakistan as well overland. So we went overland to Pakistan. And then we were 6 months in, and I had no intention of going back. I just liked the lifestyle. And also at this point, I learned how to juggle. And I really truly found something I feel I could be really good at, and spend a lot of time at. And that's exactly what I did. I juggled all the time. And being in Asia as a European 6'2" blonde guy, you already get a lot of attention, especially in rural areas. And now you combine that with me having pink dreadlocks and juggling. I was always used to an audience from day one. So that was a huge help, I would say, looking back.
So I want to hone in on this learning to juggle. Like, I trying to dig into this a little bit. It sounds like you made friends with a Swedish individual who like taught you how to
Yeah,
juggle.
I was living on a houseboat in India, and when I say living on a houseboat, I took yoga classes. I started doing yoga in Varanasi, Benares, as I say in Hindi, um, and we went to the houseboat, and I got unwell, so I had to rest, and I couldn't get up. But the one thing I could do was learning how to juggle, which a person who stayed on the neighboring houseboat taught me. He was from Sweden, and I don't remember his name. I don't remember anything about him, but he was the match in the fire, that started the fire, and I didn't stop. I just loved it from day one, and I wasn't a natural either. It took me all day to learn how to do basically a cascade. If you get three balls going in a traditional way, they call it a cascade. So it took me a whole day sitting down.
What a chance encounter just to sit there and find the thing you're passionate about based off of one conversation because you're sick.
Well, yes and no. I mean, one could also make the point what a delay in having being exposed to it, because think back to your own childhood, and you probably have had a teacher who learned you how to juggle in school, or like an assembly program, or you've seen a performer. It took me like in my 20s to finally be exposed to juggling. I was almost a little bit mad. It's like, why didn't my mom or somebody else ever showed me it? But it's good. It's all good. Here we are.
I mean, I think it's just the nature of the beast. It's the thing you always want to learn. You wish you had learned earlier. So why didn't I do that when I was 5? You know?
Yeah, when you combine that with, like, that at this point you better become a comedy juggler, because you're not going to blow people out of the water with your technical skills, which you still do in a sense, because you at any given point are more likely to do more than 99% of the people around you. and so you can sell it as such. But if you do go to a jogging convention where many hobbyists are there, and technically they're way surpass me, and for many reasons, hours of practice, given talent, and perhaps age when they started. But back to you. When did you were you ever exposed to joggling? Did somebody ever taught you as a kid?
Well, fun story, Hilby. I had a guest on the show earlier by the name of Greg Bennick, who he's a professional juggler and motivational speaker. He also was the lead singer of a hardcore band called Trial. And while we were talking, I was thinking about what I wanted to get my family for Christmas. So this past Christmas, I got everybody juggling sets, and we all decided to like juggle in my kitchen. So I was in my late 30s when I decided to try juggling for the first time, good sir. So you were light years ahead of
Wow,
me.
I got a head start on you. I got a head start on you. But I assume you got it.
I was able to cascade for maybe 4 seconds. Like I have the balls downstairs. I got to practice, so next time I see you, we can compete.
That's 3 seconds more than most people.
I'll take it. Well, so you end up, you travel to India and Pakistan, you learn how to juggle, and I just love the visual of you in pink dreadlocks, in the middle of this chaos just sounds amazing. When was the first time that you kind of took those skills into the street and tried to captivate an audience?
Well, almost as I said from day one, because I was a low budget traveler. So I was looking back, and we survived on $5 a day. So that gives you a bit of an idea what our housing was like. But we usually had our own stove with us, and we rode bikes for many parts of this journey. And we can get back that a bit later. But as I said, if you're in public in most Asian countries, and you're 6'2" and have pink dreadlocks, you already draw attention to yourself. And now you put joggling on top of it. And then I remember the very first time somebody gave me money I was in Pakistan, in Islamabad, and I went to the Friday market. And it was only by accident that actually my head fell on the ground and I was juggling, and then somebody put some rupees in there, and I'm like, no, this is nice. And then actually more and more came, not when I say more and more, not to the point of riches and so forth, but I remember having enough to treat myself to some goodies I usually downed. And then the rule always was that if I got money from then on in Pakistan, India, Nepal, and Tibet when we were there, that half of it goes always to another performer, street performer. And there were plenty of them in these countries, like somebody who played an instrument or somebody who was asking for money on the street, for various reasons. Yeah.
That was one thing I was kind of curious about. First of all, I love that. I love that plan. I think like divvying up money in your brain to ensure that you're using it for some sort of functional purpose is really cool, and that's to be applauded. But I'm also curious about like as you were traveling, like what sort of street performers were grabbing your attention to get you to the point where you're like, oh, I want to join this little act.
Well, nobody, because in the beginning, it was, as I said, there's not much of a street performing scene in Islamabad, and I would probably put money down that it's most likely illegal to do that in a grand scale. And India was in the very first time I seen performers on the street, and their performances were very traditional in their sense, but very unusual for what I know now. And they were often combined sideshow with acrobatics and contortion. We did see a dancing bear once. Yeah, not necessarily where I went like, this is what I want to do. But I did like the idea of performing. And for me, it was in the beginning, when I say I performed on the street there, I was just practicing on the street more or less in the beginning. And that was enough for some people to give me money. I didn't have what they call in the business a shtick. I didn't interact with the audience, maybe rather than making eye contact and smiling and perhaps doing a few phrases in the local language, but nothing that resembles the beginning, a middle, and an end of a performance. No, not at all. Not even close. That didn't happen until at least 6 months later, yeah, when I was in the country for a little bit longer, yeah. And it's very comfortable to do it on a grand scale because, to be honest, I it's you don't really feel comfortable taking money from people where you maybe perceive them as like they probably have less than you do overall. But since I never really asked for it, I didn't really mind, and it was always voluntary. So because I didn't ask for it, but later on, then when I start asking for money, that's when my show also, when it became more of a show, when I started talking to people and had, in the beginning, I had a sign out there explaining myself. Yeah.
Was that in Japan?
The very first time was in Bangkok. Bangkok was the first place where I felt like, whoa, wait a moment, you are way more industrialized than I thought. Shame on me, number one, to think that way. But also lucky me, because now I feel there's access and there's money to spend on things such as street performing. Um, and so I did that. And it was enough for me to then continue my journey into Cambodia and Vietnam. And I ended up in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, then I thought, well, here we go. This is the land of witches. I'm going to perform there. And there were other street performers. And I got arrested for it and deported, which I was really lucky I did in a way. Not my favorite place on the planet, I must honestly say. But big cities are not my favorite place on the planet, period. So Hong Kong didn't help. And being deported and arrested. And it was when they were still under English rule and being in front of a judge that wears a wig, with the curly things. It was very ridiculous and silly. And as you can imagine, I was a bit of a hippie having pink dreadlocks, which I shaved at this point. It really didn't bother me one bit, and I was very glad to go to Japan. And I got to Japan with $1 in my pocket, I remember, and I hitchhiked to the Nippon Hoji temple, and I stayed with them. And in Japan, that's when my luck turned, and I started making some money on the street.
Well, I want to get to Japan in a second. I want to go back to Hong Kong. So, I had known you had gotten arrested and deported there, but you got arrested for performing. Is that true?
Yeah, performing. I don't know if you know Hong Kong. Hong Kong is divided in two sections, one island and one mainland, and there's a ferry going back and forwards between these two places, and they're called star ferries, and it's a very busy place, as you can imagine, because like it's one of them. I think back then, in that one area we lived had the Guinness World Record for the most dense populated area on the planet, with 600,000 people in 1 square mile or something. It was insane. It was very dense, a lot of people. And there was an English person performing, and we became friends since, but it didn't look good that we become friends in the future, from what I'm about to tell you. And he was performing there, and I was like, oh, look, a real performer, he sets things on fire and so forth. So I was very intimidated, and I found myself another spot where I sort of made enough money. And and then he came up to me and said, look, I'm leaving, I'm going to Japan, so you can have my spot now. And it's like, oh, lucky me. What he forgot to tell you is that he has also been warned several times that if we see you perform again, we will arrest and deport you. And I don't know if I, just because I was 6'2" like him, if you look alike for them, when I say for them, for the authorities, I mean like that. Or whatever the reason was, they arrested me right away. It was not even a question. And it was almost hilarious. And I looked for a reason to get out of there. I was there for 2 months at this point. We did only live in a really beautiful place called Lama Island, where you had to take a ferry to. It's like 30 minutes, and there were no cars. So it was a lovely time being there. But the daytimes in the city, I didn't like. I had the worst job of my lifetime. I was a sandwich board man. You know what a sandwich board is?
I do, but please explain it.
So you wear advertisement around your neck. It looks like two cornholes with advertisement on it. And I was walking around downtown, advertising a Chinese English pub that called the China Jump. And their claim to fame was that they had bartenders that would do flaring. You know what flaring is? Flaring is when they do juggling tricks with the bottles and the cups. Tom Cruise and Cocktail, that kind of stuff. And so I had literally had a juggler on that sandwich board walking around Hong Kong. I was not in a good space during that time. And I couldn't juggle because the board was too wide. And I put this frame on there, and I just read a lot of books during that time. And I was ready to be arrested and get out of there. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah.
Very few people tell me stories where they get arrested that inspires them to continue their
Oh, it
craft.
was it was ridiculous. It was, there's certain things in life, to be honest, where if I would ever get into legal, if I would be arrested for it, yes, I understand that it's a law, and in front of it I'm legal, but my conscience would go like, no, I'm not. For example, like weed, for example, if I would ever be caught with that, that would not be a crime for me, no matter what. Street performing would never be a crime for me, no matter what. So yeah, you can arrest me as much as you want. I'm never going to feel bad about that. Yeah.
All right, I love it. Maybe you're Banksy. I don't know. So moving forward, you end up in Japan, and that seems to be the kind of major turning point for this to become your career and your aspiration. Is that fair?
Well, I did know that whatever I'm doing is really fun, and I love the community, the jugglers I met since and during that time period. They're lifelong friends, and it's just a fun, non-judgmental community as a whole. I really, really enjoy that about it, and I like it as a sport, as a physical activity, and I was always very competitive, but I also have physical reactions to being competitive, so I get ill and I don't like it ultimately. My body doesn't like it. So juggling is a great way of expressing yourself physically, being active and not having to compete yourself. Because just because somebody joggles 9 balls, it doesn't mean he's a better jogger because you only do three. It's all about how you perceive it and how much you enjoy yourself or other people watching you for that matter. Yeah. So there's always that.
Awesome. So when you got to Japan though, what changed? I mean, you made the reference earlier about how 6 months later you started to develop an actual show and routine. How did your performance change once you made it to Japan?
Well, here's a nugget for the people who do know Japan or have lived there. Japan has a week called the Golden Week, where they have 3 consecutive holidays in the middle of the week in May. And I think it's Peace Day, Children's Day, and Emperor's Birthday. But it means also that most people in Japan take the entire week off. So it's literally 9 days to 10 days of holiday. Everybody has holidays, lots of activities. It's the end of the cherry blossom season. People get their bonuses. You can literally street perform anywhere. You can do a show in a phone booth if you wanted to. And I got there, my very first day street performing in Japan was the Monday after. And remember how I told you about the guy Luke from England who told me I should street perform, where he now leaves for Japan? That's why he went to Japan for, that he can do doing, which he didn't tell me either, which he should have told me because we could have gone together and I would have spared myself the experience of being arrested. So the very first day was so disheartening because people were just not in the mood, not at all. And I almost that was a low point. That's why it's like, wow, maybe I just not, it's not my thing. People don't respond to it the way I think they should, or I wanted it to be. Because to be fair, again, it wasn't still a show. I had a sign made and it said, Japan is very expensive. I'm studying your language. If you like what you see, please donate. And to be fair, I learned that sentence by myself. I wrote it in the hiragana, and I did study the language. And I then eventually learned enough to say hello. And I found that the audience in Japan really responded to me speaking Japanese. And also you don't have many Japanese street performers. And matter of fact, I only saw one at this point ever. And it was open season. And I always compare Japan a little bit to a board game where there's no real bad consequences. There's not much street crime. So you can't really fail. And even if you get into legal trouble for it, there weren't any laws for it yet. They didn't really know how to deal with you. I remember being in a police station and writing a letter in English that I apologized, but my apologized letter was like, no, I think street performance is a right everybody should have, and we should all make room for it. And so it was somewhat easy, to be fair, when I look back. Where it's like, well, with how little of a show, how much return I got in terms of like companionship, financial reward, and just love from that country. I just love Japan, and I would go back for the first 3 years every year for this Golden Week and the Cherry Blossom to do just that, perform and be in Japan. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think I read somewhere that you got to a point where traveling there for, was it like 6 weeks, was basically like a year's worth of revenue for you?
In the beginning, granted, that was a year's worth of revenue for as an also had lower overhead. Now, not even close. Not even taking inflation into account. But no, back then it was definitely enough. And we were a young starting family. We had our first child. And my wife back then, she was still in college. So it was, I wouldn't say a lifesaver because anything is a lifesaver in that sense, but it was great that I was being able to make money. It was stressful too because I would go street perform. There's no guarantees. So by the time you arrive there, you already spend quite a bit of money. You go in a country in a way illegally, to be honest, because you go under the false pretense that you're there to visit, but you street perform, which I'm sure requires work permits. Yeah, so I was illegal in that sense, what I did. But it worked out and everybody seemed to enjoy it. And as I said, I never forced anyone to give me money. It's always been voluntary. And yeah. And it was also during the time where the Japanese yen was very strong on top of it. And as I said, not many Japanese street performers, but then many younger Japanese people would get inspired and then they would put a show together. And to be fair, way surpassed whatever we could offer in terms of skill, language, and know-how. And yeah, so that put an end to that. But also my show in English, we got too good, and I started to book the show that I didn't have to go back. Yeah.
Sure. Let's stay in Japan just for one more second, which is what, when you were in India and Pakistan, your show was kind of just practicing, as you called it. And then you get to a point where it's a little more refined. You're figuring out the language. You're figuring out how to better interact with the Japanese population. What did your show resemble when you were street performing in Japan?
It was a tight 15 minutes. I would gather a crowd with my few lines, Ima, Tala, Showtime desu yo, go Funa today. Uh, and then I would introduce myself. I would juggle fire. And then I do the yo-yo, the Chinese yo-yo. They're called the Diablo. It's not called the Diablo from the Spanish. It's called Diablo from the Greek. I want to throw that in there so you learn something. And then I finished off on a small unicycle in the beginning, and later on a taller unicycle. And it was like, and I would make a balloon, a hard balloon for a Japanese kid. And it was 15 minutes. And back in the days, I would have one of these bowler hats I wear in my show, and I would wear that the whole time. And at the end, when I took off my hat to do my speech for collecting money, which we call in the street performing business a head speech, or like or a bottling speech, they call it. You know the term bottling? Like people call passing the hat or asking for money bottling, and it comes from the old days when people did street shows in England, and they would send a kid around with a bottle. So when people put the coins in, they couldn't come out, so that nobody would the kid wouldn't whip them off, and people couldn't take the money out. So that's why they call it bottling. But anyhow, and then I would take the head off, and I would, under my head, I would have the perfect sumo pineapple knot on top. I shaved my head just for that, and I kept the head, and I got a big laugh, ha ha ha. And that was my big gag. And then I collected the money, and I did it again. And I looked to my diary the other day. I kept track about how many shows I did, my vocabulary, and so forth, and where to go for next year, so I'm prepared. And yeah, I did 23 shows one day, like that.
23 15-minute shows.
Yeah, but to this day, even so, again, it wasn't the show as you know it today. I never had a day where I made that much income on street performing than that day 30 years ago in Japan. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
That is pretty amazing, and it's. I mean, even as you're describing it, and you're talking about bottling, I'm constantly fascinated with I don't know, the history and the lore and the sort of game of telephone that has happened with street performing over the years. Like the fact that like street performers now still owe it to somebody who was doing something 200 years ago. It's pretty neat.
No, we all have a shared history and origin. And now, I mean, now motivations have changed and psychology of it has changed. And but the concept overall is the same. You're gathering people on the street, hopefully entertain them, and then have them reward you what they think is worth it, or whatever you tell them is worth it. So I think the psychology of street performing got much more advanced. People have really figured it out now to maximize the most amount out of in the smallest amount of time. Yeah.
Your show would be 7 minutes today, and you do it, 46 times, and
No, and there's a reason why my show is often longer, and I quite enjoy that because I still love street performing. I started street performing. I still do street performer festivals. Sometimes I just do it when the opportunity arises, but I don't necessarily like what it does to your show over time. It really sort of homogenizes it. Again, in order to make a maximum amount, you really focus on getting people close together, you yourself being really high up so then more people can watch you. The whole psychology comes into play that not necessarily always beneficial for comedy. And for me, I rather like to, that's why I do more and more like mainly now paid gigs like the state fair, where I know I got a guaranteed fee. I don't have to worry. Like at the end, when I ask people about when I tell people about the buttons, it's mainly also doing because people would always tip me, and I say, look, I don't, I'm not allowed to take tips. But if you want to give me money, I don't want to stop you either. So take a button if you want to. But I also don't push that at all. It's not that I quite enjoy that freedom of it. And also, quite frankly, people are generous anyhow. If you do a good show, people will be generous.
Sure, and people want to support the arts. It's just the nature of the beast.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm sorry that we're spending so much time like on
Oh,
this really
please. Yeah, I
small,
love visiting Japan.
yeah, this like little small section, but you eventually make your way back. You and your wife end up in Ithaca, as you mentioned. You had your first child. Um, Tell me about that sort of shift to making this act work in the States. Like it seems like a totally different beast.
It's well, and it is a totally different beast in retrospect. At the time, it's like the lack of not knowing in a way, because maybe if you had known how much it entails, you might not do it. But I was very lucky in that sense that my wife's family, they had a big studio space just around the corner from where we live that I could use to rehearse. I made some money in Japan after, and also go back to Japan. Also, we initially went to Japan to be on the Peace Walk. I don't know if you know that part about me. I met the mother of my children, my first wife, in Pakistan, and she was on an international peace walk where she walked around the world. And I met her in Pakistan, and the end of the peace walk was in Japan, walking from Tokyo to Hiroshima to remember this August 6th Hiroshima explosion. And so that's how we ended up in Japan. My wife was from Ithaca. She had a really big expanded family. Her father's from North Africa, is Tunisian, and I never really had a functional big family, individual awesome family members. So for me, it was a no-brainer where we're gonna go. We went to Ithaca, and also her mother started a co-housing community. Are you familiar with co-housing? So that's another reason why we lived there. We can talk about that too. It's very interesting. We're like 30 families. We bought 200 acres. We bought environmental sustainable buildings with common spaces and shared resources. But that's a different story. But it was no brainer to ending up in Ithaca. I was very lucky that I had a space to rehearse. And also the space I rehearsed, there was a video photographer there in the same space. And he really wanted to make a video, and I was really lucky. I had a promotional video, and I was so lucky, to be honest. Like 30 years ago, one of these NBC guys, he was an NBC guy in Syracuse at Channel 5 at the time.
David Muir?
David Muir, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was an anchor at there's a video clip out there also of me and him doing a bit. And he did a bit with me with Channel 5 where he got a big audience for me, which he did. He was very popular even then. Um, and he made me ride in with my tall unicycle, and he had the entire crowd chant Fair's favorite. And that was only my second year at the state fair. And and he framed it with like blinking lights on the television screen. So it was gold for promotion. And then I had the video photographer who edited it all together for me. So I was really lucky to have a really strong tape that was almost better than my show, I must say. And that's VHS. And I did another thing. I got these more expensive Disney covers, these really thick, big ones. Remember the ones? So like, and I sent them out. I really did my homework. I got a book called Booking Your Act Worldwide, and I still have it. And I remember every day I did 2 pages, and you had to make phone calls. That was before having internet. Yeah, and 1% stuck, but out of 1,000, that's enough in the beginning. And then once you do a good show, I think things take care of themselves. And I haven't really promoted myself much in a long time now.
That's amazing. So just to make sure I'm getting this right. So you move back to Ithaca. You have this practice space. You have somebody there who's got video experience when you need your own production reel. You end up getting connected with this award-winning, now nationally known news person who makes you look like the biggest deal ever at the New York State Fair. But more importantly, you find this book of resources and you're dedicating yourself to 2 pages a day. You're going through the list of, these are people who are seeking talent. I'm calling them. I'm seeing who needs what. I'm sending them a video. They're saying, "Oh, this Hilby guy seems really cool." They're paying you to come out, and you're seeing what your batting average is from there.
Yeah, and then you learn certain things too. Like you learn, for example, if you want to be booked for indoor events like cruise ships, for example, it doesn't matter how good your outdoor tape is from footage from the fairs. They don't want to see that. They want to see an indoor. They want to see somebody being successful on stage. So then now, okay, now I have to make an indoor tape and so forth. Yeah, but that was the beginning, and that got me. At the beginning, it got me a lot of work, and I had a really lovely friend who was a photographer who was so good at what he did, and he did some really iconic photo shots too that really helped. Yeah, and of course, I would like to believe that the show itself helped. And what I did in the beginning too was I would go to the West area, to the Welcome area in New York, and get the festival guide, and I would just go and perform in places like, to give you examples, like the Lilac Festival. I would just go and what they call in street performing lingo, crash it. I would just go and what, as the title entails, I crash the festival, and then I would do it until they either hire me or kick me out. And Ramson Barn Festival, there's another one. I think I did the Oswego Harbor Fest up there once. Um, where I got kicked out. And yeah, so things like this, and then from then on, you book the show, and I like to believe that for me, the highest compliment always is when I do a performance somewhere and they want me back the next year. And that's how I ended up being at New York State for what, 31, 32 years now. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was in my list of questions, is that you you're literally like I don't know, you're a huge deal at the state fair. Well, let's just call it what it is. I mean, like you go and you look at state fair social media, and I'll say like every 30 pictures is one of, oh, there's Hilby, like doing your thing. And I'm curious about how that relationship started, because I know that was kind of a linchpin in regards to getting recurring contracts.
Oh, it's great. There was one of the addresses in the book. We were talking about it, and I remember calling with Joe LaGuardia. He was a fair manager, and little do I know that you don't really call the fair manager. You call the entertainment director or whoever's in charge of booking the entertainment. But I would keep calling him. I just kept calling. I kept calling him, and then finally he picks it up. I get through, because before it was always voicemail or he wasn't there or something. And then finally I get through, and he basically is like, "What?" And then I made my case. And it's like, I tell you what, I give you 2 days. You get the what was it? Wednesday and Thursday, whatever the first 2 days, doesn't matter. And basically, I don't know if he said it in his words, but if you stink, I don't ever want to hear from you again. You know. And so I went, and I remember so clearly going there the first day, and I walked into his office, and he was sitting there with all this paperwork, Joe, who ended up like being a legendary a fair manager. I think when you ask people who've been to the fair for decades, they remember him very fondly, and it's from a bygone era, people would say, and I would say the same thing. And anyway, I go into the office and say, "So what do you want me to do?" Because I never done a fair. It was my first time. And then he looks at me, it's like, "Well, the money we're paying you, I assume you know exactly what you do." And and then he goes like, "Best advice I ever got to this day from a fair manager," he said, "And if you see me at the show, that is not a good thing." And which basically translates into, "I know how you're gonna do. I'm really busy. If you see me there, the only reason I'm there is because I needed to see for myself what people are complaining about." And it was great advice. I went out there, did my thing. I remember also investing. I was one of the very early investors in a portable sound system. That gave me, I think that gave me a bit of an edge. I really invested some money in buying a really good, from Electrosonic, one of these horn speakers that had a wireless microphone built in, so I could be heard, and then therefore you get bigger crowds. And yeah, and they liked me enough that I came back ever since. In the beginning, I did the entire fair, but then about 6, 7 years into the fair, I did 2 days at another fair prior, and that's where I met my current wife, my wife forever, my love, Sarah. And so there's a no-brainer that I'm doing this fair for eternity. And that's how I'm splitting now the New York State Fair with that fair, Dutchess County Fair.
And so for for these first 2 days that you were doing, again, how long was your set? Where were you setting up? Like what was that act like?
It was a learning curve, but at this point I already had a bit of a shtick, because I'd done Japan, so I had a solid. It's not so much that you know the language, but you also know people's reaction, what kind of things they like, and how long to do tricks, and yeah, and how close to bring your audience. All these things you learn. There's a saying that says the first 100 times don't count, but after 100 times you better have a bit of a thing together. And I went to Key West for the first 2 winters as well. I had a VW bus, and I would drive it down, sleep in my bus, and do shows in Mallory Square. I don't know if you've ever been to Key West, but it's an iconic place where people go to see the sunset, and you can do shows all year round. And it's still a place to do that. I think it was probably more popular back then, and especially among street performers. But yeah, that's what I did. I honed my English show. I had a job with Busch Gardens, and for one summer, and you do your show 6 times a day, and you better have it down. And that's where I sort of had my first 30 minutes. So when I was at the New York State Fair, I would say I already had a solid 30 minutes. And I also had a really, really tall unicycle back then, which was almost twice as tall as the one I'm riding now. And that's getting shorter. You can almost like by the inch. It was every year 1 inch. But so there's that.
So Busch Gardens was before the State Fair contract.
Yeah, the first, and then the next season. Well, I remember Busch Gardens, I took one day off to go to Baltimore to street perform to the Inner Harbor to drive up. And I realized one day, like, I made on one day street performing what I do the entire week at Busch Gardens, which is also okay because Busch Gardens gives you a chance. They give you costumes, they give you housing, and you get to do your show and practice your craft. So you can't really expect to get a full fee. But also, when it came time to renew for the following year, I said, yeah, I don't think I can afford it if I can make more on the street. And then that's when I got to New York State Fair. Then the second first gig was the Maryland Renaissance Fair, which I've also been doing ever since in October every weekend.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, again, I'm going to apologize for kind of boomeranging all
Yes.
over the place, but I know that you originally started off with the tagline "the juggling experience" before
Yeah,
switching
yeah.
into Hilby, the skinny juggle boy. What when did that transition happen? And I want to talk a little bit about that character, if you don't mind.
I do knew that you do have to have a name that people can remember, that sticks, and it sort of also maybe also tells a little bit about your show. And I knew that the juggling experience wasn't it. And I remember doing my very first cruise ship, and there was a waitress and wait staff, and she was we were really flirtatious and also doing a show almost as a shtick. And and then at one point she said, "Oh, come on, skinny German boy," and the audience laughed. And I said, "Oh, there is something there." It's like, and I repeated it, and they got a laugh, and they got a reaction, and then I put it all together, and Skinny German Juggle Boy it was. And then the Lederhosen took another uh, a year or two. And I was at the Renaissance Fair. I was at the Renaissance Fair, and I remember the first 2 years I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin, wearing these fluffy pants, and the clothing was just ridiculous. I thought, and for juggling, it was the most uncomfortable clothing for jogging, as you can imagine. You have to have room under your arms, and there's this fluffy shirts, and then somebody went to me and said, like, "You're an idiot, Helby. Why don't you just wear lederhosen?" I'm like, "Yeah, you got it." So, and then in the beginning, it took me another 15 years before I figured out that I can have them custom made to be comfortable. So in the beginning, I was really wearing the real deal lederhosen, and that was looking back, I can't believe I did that for so long. It's very uncomfortable. I lost all my body hair on my upper legs because of it. Yeah, it's a cowhide. It just rubs, and it says, yeah. Not
But
that they
you're
look comfortable, but they're definitely not comfortable.
but you're always ready for Oktoberfest, so I guess you got that going on.
I do very little Oktoberfest. I just done one last weekend. Um, and I do like them in because I don't do them a lot. Probably that's why.
Well, so that's an interesting observation because I'm so curious about Mishael versus Hilby. Like there's the character the character of Hilby is a little rough around the edges, absolutely hysterical. Like everyone is like a playful target, is extremely talented, and juggles. And then Mishael is kind of like a street performing activist and is like ready to hop in a VW bus and sleep in it to like figure out the next thing. And I'm curious about the sort of development of the character of Hilby, and how you see the evolution of that, because clearly it's something that has evolved over the last 30 some odd years after the juggling experience, came up with this kind of tagline. And I'm kind of curious if you can just tell us a little bit about that character and how it evolved over time.
Well, in order to stand out, which you have to if you want to be booked and make a living, and also if you want to express yourself and show your art, um, you do have to stand out. You have to be memorable. And the way I approach it is by seeing what works and then highlighting it, and also seeing what works for me personally. I know plenty of tricks that work, but I also know these tricks would take me an extraordinary time to learn and practice. So I think I'm pretty good in knowing my limits and working within these limits, and highlight them as much as I can to make me look good, and make it a good, entertaining show. And the character certainly helps. Sarah, my wife, totally helped with costuming, being my moral compass at times to let me know. We have 4 kids. They constantly keep you on the toes of like which jokes I should perhaps maybe either rephrase or make them about myself or cut them out altogether. So the times are changing. What's acceptable has shifted. My idea always is to punch up and not punch down. You don't always achieve that, but if it does happen, it's not happening on purpose. So there's that. And I say in my show that if I do offend you, I'm more than happy to repeat what I said because I do mean it at the time, and the intention was always to have a laugh with you. And if I didn't achieve that, I can apologize for that, but I usually don't apologize about material or jokes. That said, I take them out if I found them unnecessary, or if I know I offend somebody with it and that joke doesn't really mean all that much. And I found it challenging also to take things out or rearrange them in a way that they work. And you have to constantly. My show is very different in certain zip codes than in others. Or when I'm on a cruise ship, or when I'm in a preschool, or when I'm at a college. Yeah.
That's interesting. What about like when it comes to I maybe the term isn't correct, but like writing material. I was reading one thing where like when a kid walks by holding cotton candy, you're like, what are you doing eating insulation? You've got these jokes and these gimmicks that you can kind of rely on, and then you've got the sort of more improvised aspect of it. And I'm curious about like how you as you develop material, is it a process where you just are sort of trying things out and you're seeing what works, and then you're kind of locking it away in your brain as like, oh, I can pull that again? Do you view your act to like really have that kind of improvised component? Like, how do you figure out what material stands?
So to be fair, number one, so like many of the jokes I do, they're I guess some people would call them classic or standards. So they exist. I didn't write these jokes. So they're my little I don't know if I like the terminology right now, but they're my little bullets. So my guns are loaded with these little bullets. I have them when I see something, boom, 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 I can shoot them. When I see the cotton candy, I have that in my pocket. I have camouflage, and I see characters in my show, and I know, okay, I don't have to do that joke right now. I'm going to keep that for a moment where I need it. So if something drops, or if something breaks, I now have 1, 2, 3 targets that I already somewhat have lined up in a sense where I can interact with, and I have something to say about it. And many other times I feel it's comedy is number one is honesty often. Like people say that you really sort of that you do mean it, that you're like sort of unfiltered and unhinged. But I think that's sort of my job to make even a joke that I have said 1,000 times has to come out like I just came up with it. And for me, again, that's the best compliment when people don't know how much of it is improvised or not. So that's a compliment, number one. So thank you for that. But I also give myself more and more permission to just say things as they pop in my head. And sometimes I'm articulate enough now that they might they might not get a laugh, but they're not get an opposite direction either often, and then you just move on and okay, that didn't really work out the way I wanted it to work out. And also take notes in my head if I see something where I go like, man, I wish I could have said something about that. Like right now I'm working on accountants. I ask people and you ask questions. So there's that. You ask questions and you have no idea how much material you get from people in the audience themselves. Things they say, things sometimes stuff they post on social media. So there's that. But I'm constantly looking for new material. I'm now working more on like not everything has to be funny, I think. Like I'm working on saying a few more charming things, like compliments. That's lately my like compliments and like I don't know, you saw did I do the pickup line thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the pickup line, not everything has to be funny right off the bat. It can be funny because of why you did it and how the circumstances themselves. So that what you say is not necessarily funny, but within the context you say it is hilarious. Yeah.
Well, it's also interesting because I think one of the things that you're really great at is like ensuring that people know that they're in a space where things can go off the handles, but it's always going to be safe. It's always going to be comfortable. Like even like you're really good at kind of towing that line between this is something that I'm going to say to a kid, like you bring a kid into the show and you're like, you're not cute, and it's said in a way where it's like, we know the kid's cute and we know this is a cute moment and this is juxtaposed to what we're actually like experiencing.
The comedy is all about surprises. So they know there's that, and yeah, you have to like, and sometimes you surprise yourself. But it's good to know that my show is perceived as a safe space because that's what I wanted to be. And I think one of your job as a performer is that you let your audience know at any given point there's no other place I would rather be than right now, right here. And I think if you can do that, there's many ways to do it. I found my way. People have other ways to achieve it, but if you can do that, I think you're already halfway there. People will already respect and like you for it. And then there's many things that people would call 101 on performing, things that sometimes I wish other people would pay a little bit more attention to, just like simple things. And I should pay attention to it more, like getting your audience close, down, turn your back to the audience, make sure that your equipment is working. When you see me where you saw me at the state fair, I was we had to rearrange the spot, but usually I show up at least 10, 15 minutes sometimes before the show. I set everything up and I start talking to the people because if something goes wrong, I have now some time to fix it, like microphone, make sure your equipment works, all these things, make sure you have, functioning props. Yeah, because all these things then can then create an environment of where people don't feel safe and yeah, your show's just not as good. That's it. Period.
Absolutely. You made a comment a few minutes ago that I just want to stay on one for 1 second, which is you talked about looking at the audience and seeing characters in the show. The idea that like there's this performance and everyone else is a part of it. And as you're, kind of taking stock of who's around you, like what kind of characters are you trying to identify in the audience?
Anyone's a character. I mean, it's almost like a muscle, and I found it very intriguing actually, because at the end of the summer, I'm just constantly, I do it in conversations, and sometimes it's not really appropriate. I found myself being in an elevator. It was a few years ago. I was in an elevator at the end of the season, and I just made a snarky comment about somebody's shirt in the elevator. He had no idea who I was, or the context of it, and it was too short of an elevator ride for me to explain myself. So all I could stay there and go like, yeah, that was wrong. Sorry. If you want to hit me, do it. I deserve it. No, but if you look at people and just think about it a little bit, close your eyes. I mean, see what there's exercises you can do. Like, one thing I do sometimes where I look at somebody and it's like, which kind of audition he's going to right now? Which kind of movie parties auditioning, and then you can just say it's like, wow, you look like a Kosovo arms dealer because like you see somebody in a tracksuit. I mean, and I do heavily rely on stereotypes. I and hopefully by punching up, but I'm a firm believer stereotypes do make life a little bit easier, and it's unfortunately that the stereotypes that are often put out like it's always people we feel uncomfortable about it, and that's unfortunate. I try not to feel uncomfortable with anyone. So as you said, it doesn't matter your ethnicity, it doesn't matter the color of your skin or your age, your sexual orientation. I hope I'll be able to have fun with anyone because if I don't, all I'm telling them is that I feel uncomfortable with you, and that's worse. You should feel you should be comfortable with everyone. And as I said, it's always with good intentions, hopefully punching up. But yeah, everybody can character. So there's these exercises you can do. There's writing exercises you can do, association exercises. So in other words, what I'm saying is like comedy is like any muscle. If you train it, it will develop. And then it's just taking chances. And for some people, it comes easier than others. I've been doing it 30 years, so I don't know if it came easy to me or not, but it certainly seems fun and easy right now. I'm having a great time. I haven't tanked in a while.
That's awesome. Well, so one last question about the Hilby experience, which is like you referenced earlier the sheer number of shows you do annually, which is a ton. You do an obscene amount of shows. And like, what does the calendar sort of look like for a performer of your stature? Like, how often are you kind of traveling around? Where are you doing shows? Like, what do the seasons of Hilby look like?
So, it has changed over the years. I mean, I don't spend 6 months, 6 weeks anymore in Key West sleeping in my van. I used to go to Antarctica in the winter for 2 months on a cruise ship. Um, don't do that anymore. So right now, what it usually is, I do about 50, 60 days a year on fairs. 40 of them to 50 between June and September. I usually do like 10 to 20 in the winter in Florida, and then I do about 40 to 50 dates with Mats Gone Nuts, where we tour theaters. And in between, it's like local shows. I do school assemblies, and I try more and more now to book myself locally because I get to sleep in my own bed. I like to be at home. I've been on the cruises. I got the T-shirts. I've seen most places. Now I like to go there on my own accord. So, for example, this weekend, I'm doing 4 shows. Starting Thursday, I do the Villa Roma, which is one of these last standing resorts in the Poconos. Then I do a few more resorts, Mohonk Mountain, which is the opposite of that, and Rocking Horse Ranch, and what is it called? Lake George Resort. Yeah.
And are those mostly stage shows?
Yeah, 3 of them are on the stage, and one of them is an Oktoberfest. So it's an afternoon show outside, I would assume. Yeah.
How do your shows change between the more Page Street performing and the stage shows?
Well, on the stage, I always like to make a little bit more production value, so I set things up a little bit more for once. Often I do the guitar bit a bit more. You can bit more subtle. Um, I don't think I did the ping pong ball on the nose on the street. So when I do the balancing thing, it's usually a little bit longer the show. It's but on the street it's usually anywhere between 35 and 45. Sometimes longer if things go really, really well and the weather's perfect. But on the stage, it's usually at least 50 minutes, I would say, to an hour. Yeah. So lengths, there's that. There's a few more musical cues. You can be a little bit more subtle, which then also makes the show longer because the pauses in between are longer. Um, yeah, those are technical aspects. But overall, the character's the same. The jokes, most of the jokes are all the same. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I I want to shifting into Mishael territory a little bit. In order to keep Hilby, the skinny juggle boy, functional, there's one word within that sentence that like worries me about aging, and that's skinny. And I'm curious about your conditioning. Like, what do you do in order to ensure that you're maintaining your physical prowess to be able to accomplish all these things?
Well, I could tell you what I do. I don't know if it necessarily helps me to stay that way because I don't know. I've always been like this. My sister is so mad because she would just look at my food and she would gain weight. And so I guess I have a metabolism that's very beneficial for the body type I find myself in. That said, I'm a monkey. I'm a very physical active. So when I say that I have some time off now, for example, right now I'm building a stone wall retaining wall at our house. I ride my bike, I go swimming, I do yoga, I joggle, I climb, I hula hoop. So yeah, I'm very active. I have an active lifestyle. I think that's mainly what it is. I don't necessarily have a schedule, but right now, for example, I ride my bike 2 miles up a hill every evening and go for like a little swim, and then I ride back. or like I do a lot of gardening, outdoor work. Yeah.
It's just really interesting because I mean the travel alone is often something that kind of slows people's physical development down. So the fact that you're like just you're living life, you're rocking some manual labor and still able to unicycle and juggle bowling balls is pretty awesome.
It doesn't mean I'm not hurt, but also I had the benefits of like what I did in my show was almost like that was my work, or that was my benefit for the day. Like when I'm done at the state fair every day, I especially if the weather is nice, I feel like I exercise, which is great, you know. So I'm in really good shape right now because of the 200 shows I did this summer. So there's that. And what I often forget, then especially at the end, I forget to do my stretching. So now I'm trying to get back into my stretching. I do like usually do a bit of yoga every day when I can. Yeah.
That's awesome. And what else do you do with your spare time? So you just talked about like all the kind of physical things that you
Sounds like I
do.
don't have any. Like, and I should have more. Well, I love my wife, so there's that. We spend as much time together as we can, not enough. And then gardening. I love being outside. I really do. We have four awesome kids. They're like just fantastic. They're really cool people, and we really try to spend as much time as we can with them. And they seem to enjoy it, and they also live in cool places. So our son from Vienna was just here for 2 weeks. Our daughter's still here. Then so we have two daughters and two sons. Yeah.
That's awesome. And one of them plays in a band. Is that correct?
But she has they and then when I say she, their pronoun is they now. And then Hawk and our son, he plays in a band, and in several bands, the Long Shots, Dumpster Debbie, and he plays fiddle, banjo, guitar, and he plays old time music. He also calls dances and clogs. And our other son, Aviv, he's getting his PhD at NYU right now and lives in Vienna. Our other daughter, she is moving to France now to teach English. And then our other child, they work on a farm in Bar Harbor in Maine right now.
I love it. Well, I know music's important to you, and one of the things I was really excited to bond with you over is our mutual love of the Clash.
Oh, yes.
And I was curious about, if we were to look at the Mishael playlist, what kind of music do you like to spend your time listening to?
Oh, okay, well, the Clash definitely has to be on it. I am really what's the quote? If it sounds good, it is good. Um, but I can jam out to so many different styles of music. But right now, this morning, for example, I was listening to James, Cage the Elephant, Nina Simone was on there. I can tell you the playlist I had this morning. It's right here. Like Le Champs-Élysées, John Prine, Bob Dylan, Bahamas, Chris Stapleton, James, Velo Montan, Moby, and Man to Man. That was my playlist this morning. And I had them on a playlist because I was able to play along to more songs on the guitar. So that was why I was listening today. But I like all sorts of music. But if I had to that's classic question. If I had to go to that island with one playlist, I think in style it would be reggae. If it would be one band, it would be the Clash. Yeah.
Hey, Guns of Brixton, man, you can listen to that song for on repeat for eternity. It's that good.
Yeah, and that was my song, but it's still my song. I'm learning my bar chords with, on the guitar.
I had a moment where I walked into a grocery store last week, and Rock the Casbah was playing, and I was just thinking to myself, like, if this is becoming grocery music, do I need to rethink my auditory listening?
No, and I was thinking the same thing. Like, what was it like? What was it? Sex Pistols in the elevator, And I'm like, oh man, I don't know. I don't know if I like that. Um, but it's still a great song. So, and I know that the Clash never gave their music for commercial reasons, but I guess after 25 years it becomes the domain or something, and that's why so much music shows up often 25 years. What is it? There's a time frame to it. Where like, how come all of a sudden I hear all this sting on commercials because the music has been released? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's another podcast, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Couple just last questions for you. I'm curious about the variety of different tours you've done, and we're going to talk about Must Go Nuts momentarily. But one part of your history that I find fascinating is that you toured with Weird Al Yankovic.
Well, when I say tour, I did a few dates with him in Pennsylvania, and I guess that's a tour. But I didn't do his whole tour. Yeah, but it was great. It's fantastic. It's my target people. They're like my people. They have a similar zany sense of humor, and it was perfect condition at the point. I mean, he has become bigger in that sense that he fills bigger stadiums now, and he has Puddles now as an opening act. He's great. He's fantastic. I don't know if you know him, but yeah, it was fantastic. It was usually 2,000 seaters, and just loved it. It was like 25 minutes. I remember the drummer was German, and he has a super tight band. I mean, they've been playing together now. Back then it was 25 years. Now it's like 35 years. So yeah, it was just a lovely experience.
What era, like what decade or what time period was this tour?
I was when the like the word like a virgin and what you also the album was the Return of the Jedi album, the Jedi one. So that was the tour.
So at that time he's still a really big deal. Like what I guess what I'm curious about is like when you're stepping in to entertain a group that's going to be expecting these sort of parody songs, like how did you adjust your act, or did you just feel confident being I'm Hilby,
Not
this
at
is what I do?
all. I mean, you're an opening act. You're not supposed to be better at what he does, and which was impossible anyhow for that matter. But I didn't adjust it one bit, I think. I mean, I knew that I don't have to worry about children in the audience, so like I could be a little bit more free there. So that's always something I check, for certain bits and pieces now. Where if there's kids, I know like I just know that I won't do that gag or I won't do that line. Um, also depends, how many kids and when and which time of the day. If there's kids at 11:30, all things go. But no, I didn't adjust it. In other words, I did have something funny happen though with the Weird Al tour. That's a nice anecdote to maybe wrap things up a little bit. Was I went for the first time we played, it was Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and we did tech rehearsal in the afternoon. And I put my vote case, like one of these classic musical vote cases, on stage and preset because I'm on first, so I couldn't put it there. So, and I left it open. And one of the votees thought, it's not safe. You're all going out for lunch. So he closed it and he locked it with one of these universal lock keys for these vote cases, which I guess are really common. I didn't even know I had one. And so when I came out, to the announcement in front of 2,000 people, didn't open. The case didn't open. In the beginning, it looked like it was a gag that was part of the shtick, but I had no out. I know I'm not going to open the case. So there was, the guy wasn't there. It wasn't to be found. And then finally, they came out with with a screwdriver and a hammer and opened it up. And that was my opening for Weird Al, yeah, in the beginning.
Did you wrap in the sound guys into
No,
the
that's when
act
you
after?
learn. That's when I broke. I think I remember breaking the lock so that you can't ever do that. Yeah. I mean, I
That
broke the lock, I think, by opening anyhow. Yeah. So there's that.
Well, now you could get to all your props, so that's wonderful. And you're right now getting ready to go on a tour with Must Go Nuts. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, like in November, we're gonna go on a tour, and before I do the weekends at the Renaissance Fairs, Pennsylvania in October, they're really fun. I don't know if you've ever been to a Renaissance Fair, but I highly encourage everyone to go. It's just a fun way to watch entertainment, and you also, if you like shows like mine, you see shows on the Renaissance Fair you will never otherwise see because they're very specific to that market, and often that's all the venues they do. So yeah, again, highly recommend to go. So I do that in October. In November, we're going to Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Illinois, I think, and Ohio, for like 14 days and 3 weeks. And then I come back home, and then winter time is spent mostly here. And then January, go back on tour with them in Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina. Yeah.
You never slow down, my friend. You never slow down. So at the end of the show, I always like to just make space to see if there's anything that we haven't covered that you want to talk about. Is there anything that you want to throw out there?
Yeah, grow more native plants to attract pollinators. We haven't talked about that, but it's a long subject. But if I had to say something, yeah, grow a garden, have some plants, make them native, attract pollinators.
You can listen to the Blondie Pollinator album while supporting bees. That sounds awesome.
Absolutely. Wow, you catch up quick. Nice one. I can actually do that later.
Cool, cool, cool. Well, Mishael, it was an absolute joy to have you on the show. For anybody who is interested in learning more about Hilby the Skinny German Juggle Boy, where are the best places to find you?
Well, you have the classic Instagram, which is Hilby Skinny German Juggle Boy. I don't, and then Facebook, the same thing. I think skinny is not part of it anymore because it's a trigger word. And so I took it out. It was not necessary to have it in the title if it avoids harm or hardship for some people, So, but also, quite frankly, didn't want people to have to click twice a button that said, you know what I'm talking about. So it was not important enough so that I kept it in. But yeah, Hilby, if you type in Hilby, in any order with Skinny German Juggle Boy or without Skinny on social media, I show up instantly. If you type in my name in Google, my website shows up. There's not too many Skinny German Juggle Boys out there. Yeah, that's the easiest way to find me. If you walk around, in the fall at the Housatonic River in the late afternoons, you probably find me if you walk long enough. Yeah, hopefully you'll find me at one of the shows. That would be the best. Go see for yourself.
Love it. Well, Mishael, thank you so much for being on the show. This was a pleasure.
That was really fun, Ryan. Thanks so much.
Whoa. That is a new perspective of my favorite German. I most specifically just can't get the sight of pink dreadlocks on the youthful Hilby out of my brain. So, Mishael, thanks so much for coming on the show. And you know what you really did? You respawned my interest in travel. I want to go and just ride trains and see what I can do and pick up crazy jobs. Maybe I'll become a vagabond in the future. If you're somebody who is looking for additional entertainment, there is a huge back catalog of episodes to check out. Everybody from Jessica Montgomery, the amazing photographer doing commercial photography for crazy things like beer cans, or listening to Daniel Handler, who's more famously known as Lemony Snicket, who wrote the series of Unfortunate Events books. Maybe you're somebody who needs a Wizard of Oz fix and you want to hear from Gregory Maguire, the writer of Wicked, or you want to hear from John Fricke, the Emmy Award-winning Judy Garland historian. Maybe you're somebody who's looking for a new book to read and you want to listen to the author Soma Mae Shung Fraser talk about her amazing novel Off the Books, or you're looking for something musical and you want to hear from Lawrence Katz of the Muddy Muddy Boss Tones. There is a huge catalog with the Meditations podcast, so please go through, give it a listen, and see if anything stands out to you. Equally, if you're interested in learning more about me, Ryan Zlomek, the voice behind the show, you can find at Ryan Zlomek on Instagram and TikTok. You can find the World of Ryan Zlomek on Facebook. You can also email me meditations@ryanzlomek.com. I'm always excited to hear back from listeners and hear what kind of cool stuff you're interested in. But as always, this show is not about me. It's not about my guest. It's about the importance of making space for conversation with other people, just so we can kind of slow down and pick up and be present. So go out, talk to somebody you don't know, have an amazing conversation, and most importantly, have an awesome day. Thanks so much for listening. You mean the world. Bye.